For being here. I just want to say how important it is that we're having today's hearing. Let me just give you an example why. Yesterday, I'm from the state of Missouri. Yesterday, I was talking with some of the constituents back at home, a group of about 30 people. Every single one of them told me that they felt they had been disenfranchised, that their votes didn't matter, that the election had been rigged. These are normal, reasonable people. These are not crazy people. These are reasonable people, and who, by the way, have been involved in politics. They've won, they've lost, they've seen it all. These are normal folks living normal lives who firmly believe that they have been disenfranchised. And to listen to the mainstream press and quite a few voices in this building tell them after 4 years of nonstop Russia hoax, it was a hoax. It was based on, the whole Russian nonsense was based on, we now know, lies from a Russian spy. The Steele dossier was based on a Russian spy. After 4 years of that, being told that the last election was fake and that Donald Trump wasn't really elected and that Russia intervened, after 4 years of that, now these same people are told, you just sit down and shut up. If you have any concerns about election integrity, you're a nutcase. You should shut up. Well, I tell you what, 74 million Americans are not going to shut up, and telling them that their views don't matter and that their concerns don't matter and they should just be quiet is not a recipe for success in this country. It's not a recipe for the unity that I hear now the other side is suddenly so interested in after years of trying to delegitimize President Donald Trump. So suffice it to say, I'm not too keen on lectures about how Missourians and others who voted for President Trump and now have some concerns about fraud, about integrity, about compliance with the law, should just be quiet, and that they are somehow not patriotic if they raise these questions. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. Let me talk about the First Amendment. Judge Starr, I want to begin with you, because I know that you have spent much of your life as a litigator defending the First Amendment. Have you ever seen anything like we saw in the closing days of the election, when you had the biggest corporations in the history of this country, the most powerful corporations in the world, Facebook, Twitter, working with the Democrat campaign to suppress legitimate reporting on Hunter Biden, who we now know is under federal investigation for criminal wire fraud, tax evasion, other things? Have you ever seen anything in your career like that, Judge Starr, where we have these giant corporate conglomerates censoring and suppressing news directly bearing on an election weeks beforehand, and doing it apparently in conjunction with one of the major political parties? Have you ever seen anything like that?
No, I think we live in a new age, and we need to go back to great lessons from constitutional law, as you well know, Senator Hawley, and Justice William Brennan, an icon of the Warren Court, saying that our democracy is based upon robust and uninhibited debate. And Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes saying, let's test things in the marketplace of ideas. You can't test places, ideas and theories unless you allow the marketplace of information and communication to flourish.
Well said. I agree with that 100%. And, you know, it's an extraordinary thing not to be able to get. I've had Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg under oath. We've asked them, did you coordinate with the Democrat campaign? How was it that within minutes of this story breaking, that both of those major corporate giants decided that they would suppress this story, and exactly what the Biden campaign wanted them to do? They won't answer questions. I've asked the FEC to determine whether or not this was an illegal campaign contribution on the part of these corporate entities, and I just can't fathom why anybody who cares about free speech in this country would be fine with these mega corporations controlling what people can and cannot say and trying to intervene in a presidential election. Let me ask you, Judge Starr, about something else. Let's talk a little bit about mail-in balloting. In your written testimony, you discussed the findings of the Carter-Baker Commission, and you've mentioned that again here today. That commission commented on the use of mail-in ballots after the 2000 election. Can you tell us a little bit about that commission's finding on mail-in ballots, as you recall it, and talk about some of the warnings that commission put into place?
Yes, the commission was referring to absentee ballots, but of course, in light of what has happened in this presidential election, we're now talking about the unprecedented use of mail in ballots. And their concern and their warning of former President Carter and Secretary of State Baker is that this is a mechanism or a platform for fraud and abuse. Be careful about it. Have safeguards in place. And I think that's at the bottom what some of these concerns are. Uh, how did dead people vote, accepting that allegation from Nevada? It is because of inadequate safeguards. Something the dead person didn't walk into the ballot into the voting booth and vote. Someone voted for him or her. We have to have those safeguards in place, and that's what the commission was saying and issuing that fervent warning that it may get worse in a deeply divided country.
26 states, as I understand it, when it comes to mail-in voting, Judge, 26 states now in this country allow third-party ballot harvesting of mail-in votes. That's where you can pay a third party to go distribute the ballots. And you can't do this in my home state of Missouri because we have control similar to those in Ohio that Senator Portman was talking about. But in other states, 26 states, you can pay a third party to go distribute the ballots. You can pay a third party to pick up the ballots. There's no chain of custody there. There's no verification. This seems to me an invitation to fraud and abuse. I've introduced legislation to end third-party ballot harvesting nationwide, to make it illegal nationwide. Would you agree, Judge Starr, that looking at something like third-party ballot harvesting is a common sense approach? By the way, some House Democrats even have endorsed this approach. Would you agree with me that that's a common sense place to start when we think about preventing fraud and addressing it in our elections?
Yes, because the opportunity for fraud and abuse is so rife and omnipresent with that kind of, if I may now call it that, worst practice. So many states have best practices. We heard from Senator Portman about Ohio. Other states have these safeguards in place. Let's put safeguards in place, but one of them is let's eliminate practices that are so prone to fraud and abuse.
And I think that's just the very beginning of what we should do. We should also make sure that poll watchers from both parties can be present at all times, that there are eyes on ballots, cameras on ballots at all times, that there's signature verification requirements that are mandatory, that there's mandatory reporting requirements about where we are in the count, where the states are, so the states just can't go dark for days at a time. All of this stuff ought to be common sense. There is no reason we should just shrug our shoulders and say, well, fraud happens all the time, no big deal. It is a big deal. It's a very big deal. And for millions and millions of Americans in this election, it's a very, very big deal indeed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.